At 3:15 local time, under the lightless sky above the Persian Gulf, an F-35C carrying the call sign Viper 1 moved forward in full stealth mode. Radio silence was total as the aircraft closed in on the Iranian coastline, still 120 nautical miles away. Its objective was OGAB-44, a $2.5 billion underground airbase built deep inside Granite Mountains. Then everything changed in an instant. The radar warning system inside the pilot's helmet suddenly flared to life. 6 separate hardlock alerts from S-400 Triumph and Bavar 373 fire control radars lit up the display at the same time, locking onto what is considered the most advanced stealth fighter on Earth. That was not supposed to happen. Earlier cyber operations were expected to cripple Iran's early warning network, yet the exact opposite seemed to be unfolding. And within only 90 seconds, 40 Scud-4B hypersonic missiles were expected to launch, threatening to reduce America's billion-dollar symbol of air power to wreckage over the Persian Gulf. But Iran made one critical mistake. With all attention fixed on the F-35, no one noticed that just 300 meters away, at 45,000 feet, an aircraft that looked like an ordinary commercial airliner, using the call sign Ghost Rider, was quietly bringing a classified system online. This previously unknown technology was the real wildcard, and tonight it would shape the future of the Middle East. What was this weapon? How could a slow-moving aircraft that looked civilian have the power to shift the entire battle? The answer, over the next 13 minutes, would permanently change the way people think about modern warfare. Iran's confidence that night was not based on guesswork. It rested on hardened defenses and one of the boldest deception strategies of the 21st century. The American target, OGAB-44, was far more than a runway hidden underground. It was an entire subterranean city, engineered to survive even the most powerful bunker-busting strikes. Inside were more than 200 upgraded Shahed 136 drones, Su-35 flanker E-fighters recently transferred from Russia, and a reserve of medium-range ballistic missiles prepared for rapid launch. 48 hours earlier, U.S. Cyber Command had quietly opened a major digital offensive. Millions of lines of malicious code were pushed into Iran's power grid and radar infrastructure. Inside the Pentagon, operators watched status indicators across Iran's air defense network turn red one after another, suggesting those systems had been neutralized. Washington believed the battlefield had been blinded before the first shot was even fired. That assumption was wrong. Iran had anticipated exactly this move. What American cyber team struck was not the real network at all, but a digital decoy. A carefully designed trap meant to draw attention away from the actual defense architecture protecting OGAB-44. Iran had relied on a simple but extremely effective safeguard: total isolation. Its S-400 and Bavar 373 launch systems were cut off from the internet and separated from the national power grid. Instead, they operated through a sealed internal network, exchanging data through fiber optic cables buried 10 meters underground, protected from remote intrusion and immune to outside digital interference. Iran had not only preserved its air defense capability, it had also changed the way it hunted. All active radar systems were powered down. Those radars normally emit signals that can reveal their location and make them vulnerable to counterstrikes. In their place, Iran quietly activated an upgraded passive sensor network, supported by powerful electro-optical surveillance systems positioned along the peaks of the Zagros Mountains. This network did not broadcast. It listened. It monitored shifts in air movement and tracked the faint infrared traces from the F-35's engines against the cold night sky. Viper 1 had been followed for 20 minutes without the pilot realizing it. Iran stayed disciplined, holding strict emissions control the entire time. Only when the aircraft entered the kill box, the point where retreat was no longer practical, did they switch on the S-400 fire control radar for the final phase. It was a textbook ambush. Draw the target in, seal off the escape path, then strike at the decisive moment. Iran believed the F-35 was finished. They were wrong. Now roll the clock back to 3:15. The instant the lock warning appeared, the Combined Air Operations Center at Al Udeid activated Plan B. They did not immediately send Ghost Rider deeper into the threat zone without first stabilizing the situation. Instead, the first order went to the aircraft built for exactly this kind of crisis. 2 EA-18G, Growler Electronic Warfare Squadrons, designed to operate on the front edge of danger. From the deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford, 2 squadrons launched almost simultaneously. Their aircraft surged forward, powering up ALQ-218 receivers and electronic jamming pods at full output. Within seconds, a massive cloud of electronic interference flooded the sky, aimed directly at Iran's fire control radars. At the same time, the newest AGM-88GA-ARGMER anti-radiation missiles streaked away from their launch rails. Accelerating to supersonic speed, they rode the very radar signals being aimed at the F-35s, homing in on their source with deadly precision. The objective was simple: force those radar systems offline immediately or eliminate them completely. For the first 5 minutes, the strategy looked like a success. The warning locks that had filled the F-35 pilot displays suddenly disappeared. Iranian communications appeared disrupted by the intense electronic interference. One by one, the AGM-88G missiles plunged into remote mountain valleys where radar transmissions had been detected, detonating with explosions powerful enough to shake the surrounding cliffs. The F-35C formation steadied itself and continued deeper toward its objective. Pilots prepared to release GBU-53 Stormbreaker glide bombs aimed at the tunnel entrances of the underground base. Back in the operations center in Qatar, American commanders began to relax slightly, believing the Growlers had taken control of the battlefield. But the calm was misleading. The sudden silence from Iran's air defenses wasn't panic or failure. It was discipline, the quiet stage of a carefully prepared trap. Just as the American formation crossed the point where turning back would become extremely difficult, the real defense network revealed itself. The radar emitters struck by the Growlers turned out to be nothing more than disposable decoys. The true defensive systems, Iran's domestically developed Bavar 373 and Khordad 15 missile complexes, were still fully operational and had never activated their main radars. Instead of radar guidance, they relied on a network of electro-optical and infrared observation systems placed along the highest mountain ridges. These sensors fed live imagery directly into an underground command center through fiber optic cables. Because the system never emitted radio waves, the Growlers' warning receivers had nothing to detect, and the anti-radiation missiles had no signal to follow. Then the sky erupted. From hidden launch positions carved into mountain crevices, dozens of bright streaks shot upward. Sayyad 4B interceptor missiles accelerated toward the stratosphere at speeds approaching Mach 6. Their flight path was guided by coordinates generated from the optical tracking system. Only in the final seconds before interception would their onboard radar seekers activate. The Growlers, focused on suppressing radar frequencies, suddenly found themselves facing a threat that didn't rely on those signals at all. 2 F-35 pilots were forced to break formation instantly, releasing flares while pulling extreme 9G evasive turns to avoid the incoming interceptors. The carefully organized strike formation scattered in multiple directions. The operation was unraveling. Then a new development made the situation even more dangerous. Early warning satellites detected movement at OGAB-44. The massive launch doors of the underground base were slowly opening. Iran appeared ready to send out waves of ballistic missiles and drones, precisely at the moment when the American formation was struggling to regain control. If the United States ordered a withdrawal now to protect its aircraft, the move would leave the Fifth Fleet exposed to a powerful strike emerging directly from the mountains. The stakes had suddenly become enormous. This was the moment when the aircraft known as Ghost Rider quietly entered the scene. The platform was the EA-37B Compass Call. While fighters maneuvered through missile threats, the EA-37B maintained a steady orbit near the edge of international airspace, closely accompanied by an RC-135 rivet joint surveillance aircraft. Unlike the Growler, which relies on overwhelming signal power, the EA-37B represents a different philosophy of electronic warfare, something known as cognitive EW. Instead of drowning out radar signals or intercepting missiles directly, its mission targets something far more critical: the command and communication systems guiding those weapons. Iran had buried fiber optic cables underground to prevent interception. But physics creates a small vulnerability at the connection points where underground cables link to mobile launch systems. At these junctions, tiny amounts of electromagnetic leakage occur, extremely faint signals known as side-channel emissions. To most equipment, those signals are invisible. But the RC-135's highly sensitive antenna array was designed to detect exactly that kind of subtle electromagnetic activity. Once the signal pattern was identified in the desert below, the EA-37B activated a specialized system known as SWORD, System-Wide Open Response Design. Using advanced algorithms, the system launched a sophisticated spoofing operation. Instead of blocking communications, it quietly inserted false data packets into Iran's command network through those microscopic electromagnetic gaps. The goal wasn't destruction, it was confusion. Within moments, Iranian missile control systems began receiving firing commands that were slightly delayed by about half a second. Target coordinates began drifting off course by roughly 300 meters. It was a precise, non-kinetic tactic. Rather than stopping missiles directly, the system interfered with the accuracy of the guidance network controlling them. But there was a serious risk. To inject signals strong enough to override the original transmissions, the EA-37B had to move closer, much closer. Its systems required a distance of less than 150 miles from the defense network to penetrate the protected signal environment. That meant leaving the safety of international airspace. The aircraft itself offered little protection. Built on a modified Gulfstream G550 airframe, it had no stealth design, flew at subsonic speeds, and carried no direct defensive weapons. The 7-person crew aboard the EA-37B knew exactly what this meant. By moving forward, they were placing a large, slow aircraft within range of long-range air defenses. The moment the EA-37B crossed into the danger zone, Iran's passive detection network noticed the unusual electromagnetic pattern. Inside the underground command bunker at OGAB-44, Iranian operators suddenly realized something unexpected. The real threat that night was not the stealth fighters. It was the aircraft that looked like a civilian jet slowly approaching from the darkness. Inside the command bunker, Iranian officers reacted instantly. A reserve S-300 PMU-2 battery that had been hidden until the final moment was ordered into action. Its mission was clear: concentrate every available interceptor on the EA-37B. 2, 4, 8, and 6E 3 missiles blasted out of their launchers and surged through the sky at nearly Mach 6, racing toward the electronic warfare aircraft. Inside the EA-37B, the electronic warfare officer responded immediately. The aircraft's AESA emitter system along the fuselage powered up to maximum output. The crew did not try to physically intercept the incoming missiles. Instead, they directed a concentrated electronic beam toward the missiles' data link antennas and the ground control station guiding them. At the same time, the system began injecting millions of false coordinate packets directly into the OGAB-44 command network. The outcome would be decided in milliseconds. The question was simple, but brutal. Could the EA-37B corrupt Iran's fire control data before the interceptors reached their target? The missiles closed rapidly, 5 nautical miles. At that distance, a large commercial-derived aircraft like the G550 normally has no realistic way to avoid a high-speed interceptor. Then something unexpected happened. The radar seeker inside each missile suddenly encountered conflicting data. The guidance instructions being transmitted from the ground command center no longer matched what the missile's onboard radar was detecting. The EA-37B's spoofing had created a contradiction inside the targeting system. To the missile's safety software, it looked like the weapon might have been compromised. Both interceptors triggered their built-in self-destruct protocols. 2 bright fireballs erupted in the sky, their shockwaves rippling outward and briefly rattling the thin fuselage of the G550. At that exact moment, Iran's integrated air defense network slipped into chaos. Mobile launchers began receiving corrupted instructions. Some systems interpreted the data as shutdown commands. Others rotated aimlessly while trying to reconcile conflicting coordinates. Radar units lost synchronization with their command nodes. And something even more critical happened at OGAB-44. The bunker's hydraulic door control software encountered a data conflict error inserted moments earlier by the EA-37B's electronic intrusion. The massive launch doors froze halfway open. The base was suddenly stuck in a vulnerable position. American commanders moved instantly. Using the brief 100 to 20-second window created by the electronic disruption, a squadron of F-15EX Eagle, 2 aircraft surged in from the rear at nearly Mach 2.5. These aircraft weren't there for precision dogfighting. They were carrying heavy bunker penetration weapons. Their goal wasn't to destroy the entire underground complex. The mountain itself was far too strong for that. Instead, the pilots aimed for the openings. 4 5,000-pound GBU-72/B bunker-penetrating bombs were released with pinpoint accuracy, guided directly into the half-jammed door slots and nearby ventilation shafts. Moments later, the explosion shook the mountainside. The underground structure itself survived, but the access tunnels collapsed. Debris and rocks sealed the exits, trapping aircraft and drone systems inside the facility. OGAB-44 still existed beneath the mountain, but it had become something else entirely, a sealed concrete vault. No fighters could roll onto the runway, no drones could launch. The United States had not wiped out Iran's entire military capability. Thousands of missiles and other assets remained across multiple bases. But the message of the operation was unmistakable. Victory didn't require flattening the mountain. All it took was making the base unusable. As dawn approached, the EA-37B Ghost Rider turned back toward Al Udeid Air Base, leaving behind a battlefield that had suddenly gone quiet. A large-scale regional conflict had been avoided, yet the operation revealed something far more important. A new era of warfare had arrived, one where lines of code, data links, and invisible signals could shape the outcome of battles faster than traditional weapons. For Iran, the real concern wasn't simply the loss of a single base. It was the realization that someone might now have the ability to reach into their entire defense network and flip the switch whenever they chose.